move, you got to be panelists also, huh? Well,
Yeah, I don't know. Zoom, it's always like a hit or miss. I don't know, but
I don't know
there's
how you knew to do that. That was pretty good.
hey, that's like the secret, man. Just if it's not working, just turn it off and on. And if that doesn't work, then do it again.
Right, I was ready to just push my laptop off the table and then pick it back up, see if that
Yep,
worked.
exactly.
Well,
So
I didn't go into any price yet. Is that kind of what you guys want to start off with?
yeah, I figured. I mean, everyone cares about Bitcoin. I mean, this just dropped $500 last night, and now it's back up a little bit, some sort of rebound. And people, we were just kind of talking about how everyone kind of latches onto a narrative. We really haven't talked about the chart.
Yeah. Um, I thought it was interesting on Twitter just seeing some guys are kind of that like to kind of rag on the technicians and saying, "Oh, everybody thought this was so bullish, and where's your chart now?" The fundamental guys, but to me, this was a pretty simple trend line that we've kind of been talking about for a while. I mean, I know I have a lot on this chart, but this has kind of been this consolidation, whether you look at futures or we're looking at the cash market. Let me flip over to the cash screen too. And this has just been this long-term kind of consolidation we've been in. So I think the technicians, there was probably a lot of guys that had this as a pretty big area for resistance. So, anything can happen. That's what we kind of talked about. It's tough to try to anticipate who the sellers are, or, what offers are on the screens. I mean, it's just anybody can come in at any time, whether they want to smash the market or they want to lift the market. But we've just been talking about this is kind of the long-term area the market really has to get above. Like I got some other charts here teed up on the cyclical side. And from here, we've talked about this longer term wave, the sine wave, the 8.6-month cycle. And so 8.6, obviously you can round up. If the high was in January, we thought maybe we'd break out in August. Maybe it's going to roll into September. But we can see that there's a convergence of the cycles here coming into the third week in September. So here's the faster wave that worked really well off the highs in January when we went for 12 for 13 with turning points around this. You can see this red cycle here. So that was the high in January. We had a low here, lower high. Here was a pivot low at the turning point, another pivot high right here with the turning point. So this rhythm actually went on for like 12 out of 13 cycles, and it hasn't really jived as well lately, but we definitely put in another lower high here. The cycle actually turned yesterday, and I don't have that trend line in place, but it was all the same area. So cyclically in the time perspective, we lined up. That's why we were actually pushing the sell button, taking some stuff off that we bought well the last couple days before today's move, just from a cyclical perspective. And then you had the 200-day above, which everybody was going to have, and then depending on how you draw the trend lines, that kind of came in right around 7,400. So that's, I don't, you can always go back and try to figure out what the narrative is going to be, or what people are talking about around why price did what it did. But I think cyclically, you kind of had to be thinking that was resistance. Then we have a daily cycle high as far as the stochastic cycle that I think is trouble. So we're going to just be a little bit patient on buying stuff back. But again, you can see this cycle is more like the third week in September 17th to 18th. What were your guys' thoughts?
Real quick, do you want to make Brennan also a panelist in here?
Oh, yeah, he's jumping on. Nice.
Yep. No, I mean, I understand. I agree with you there. It's kind of just what it seems like it's been doing, and I mean, it's pretty clear. It's people try to latch on to those news items when you really look at a chart like this and you think, oh, well, that looks completely natural there. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really need any other explanation other than just looking at that price action.
Right.
Well, especially when you consider, like, if you look at just the stochastics, we're almost higher than we've been for what, 6+ months, and people are wondering, oh, how would it drop $500 overnight? It was incredibly overbought.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the speed of this move, kind of tends to happen over the weekends when they just blast it. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's some of these over-the-counter guys that can't get their big blocks done and they just get fed up and didn't get their price, and maybe they just have to hit the screens. But that was pretty quick. What time was this? It's exactly 6:30 this morning, 5:30.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I think if you have a timing process and you're looking at things cyclically, there was reasons to sell yesterday and the day before instead of having to come in, panic, and clearly people are selling after the fact, 200-300 points lower. Brennan, you're jumping on here? I think you're on now. Hey, buddy.
Yeah. Good morning, guys. How are you?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
Good. The timing of your cycle make a lot of sense, especially when I got pinged on. Sometimes I follow crypto panic for too much news and information. But one of the first things I woke up to this morning was a headline saying $1 billion worth of Bitcoin on the move, $100 million sent to exchanges as of this morning. And, that could also probably attribute to people watching these cycles to that large volume of sell pressure.
Oh, that's interesting. You saw that?
Yeah, they think it's a Silk Road Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that seller.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what are the reason they're? It's kind of interesting too. The exchanges they're moving it to, like they're moving a lot to Binance specifically, and there's no fiat gateways there yet. So it means they're diversifying into alts at some point. I don't know what's that to do. Maybe to wash it, launder it. Or just, that alone can pretty much pump up any altcoin. I could sending 100 million to Binance.
So you can't see what was on the other side of that BTC still?
Well, no, because it just goes to an exchange and all that's, that becomes hidden.
Yeah. Yeah, you're probably right, Alec. Maybe they sell it for BNB because it's cheaper and then don't pay the commission and then split it up from there.
Maybe moving it to, they still have to withdraw everything through KYC, limited Bitcoin if they're moving it to exchanges. So, maybe it's not just specifically for BNB. Maybe it's for some privacy coins, or maybe they're just thinking, well, we got to diversify now. They have so much Bitcoin.
Yeah, the other thing in the news, obviously, Ether getting hit pretty good. We talked about it yesterday. It's so cheap relative to pretty much all the other major altcoins, and I guess cheap gets cheaper. I think that's one though. When we do like Bitcoin on the long side again, I think Ether is probably one you got to put on the top of your list. It's just getting down to kind of stupid levels. What do you guys think?
Well, I actually mentioned it in the room yesterday that when Ether tends to decouple from BTC, it kind of lags behind on about a 2 to 3 week time frame. We saw that happen back in November and December, and then when we hit the highs in December for BTC, I think Ethereum didn't hit its all-time high until like 3 weeks after that. So, like you said, once we do see BTC really start moving, I'm personally going to be buying up even more Ether.
Yeah,
it's not like it's one of these projects that's going to be going away. There's way too much money in the game, too many projects being built on it for it to just evaporate.
right.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how it did get hit a lot harder though. It got hit like a 20% move off that, after that news, which is it's kind of weird how it got hit so hard. I don't know why it got hit so hard, but it's interesting to see that, because I don't know how it really correlates to, the news wasn't really specific. It was more about Bitcoin, and it wasn't even negative news. So we're trying to rationalize this, and it's probably not a rational reason.
Yeah, and then it's typical too. I'm seeing a lot of headlines about the bearish bets picking up on Ether. It seems like this happens every time into the lows too. It's definitely a pretty technical break, and I kind of like what you said, Chris. When we get back to levels we like on Bitcoin, then's the time. Just because Ether looks cheap Ether looks cheap, but Bitcoin's stuck on the top of the risk range. That's not exactly when you want to buy. I'd rather look at what's cheap when Bitcoin gets to levels we like, you know. Monero's had a pretty big run on a relative values basis too lately. But we were looking at this kind of in the room. I think Binance has been the strongest. You had 0x versus BTC has been one of the strongest coins. All that stuff shows up on this kind of relative value charts that we look at. But Cardano and Ethereum are stuck here. I probably have like 20 coins up here that we track in the top 50.
Mm-hmm.
What are you guys in YouTube looking at? Looking for the hopium?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that, you know, the Ethereum drop is because ICO's panic selling. I mean, that's interesting. I don't know why they'd be panic selling now, but at the very end, you know, tail end of this 6-month run. But yeah, I mean, that might be why Ethereum's a little quicker to react and harder to react than, you know, Bitcoin, for instance, because there are a lot of projects relying on the price of Ethereum staying up. So, you know, I mean, can you imagine, you know, all these ICOs, they're sitting on so much Ethereum and their funding, you know, is completely dependent on it. So maybe they're quicker to pull that trigger just to get out and secure whatever kind of funding they have.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of panic along those lines, you know.
Wouldn't you guys also agree that Ethereum's had quite a big, you know, some negative press lately? I mean, like even again this morning, reading a headline, Ether's value could drop to zero. Eventually says Bitcoin core contributor, and you know it goes on to mention problems with the network, including scalability issues, lack of widespread adoption, failure to adopt safer contracts, authorizing practices could lead to eventual loss of value for ETH.
Yeah, I mean, headlines like that have never stopped since the very beginning.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, there are obvious problems that you know need to be addressed, and you know, I think it just takes time, and you know, you got to view Ethereum a little bit differently than Bitcoin. You know, a little more experimental, a little different. So, yeah, I mean, those things are obviously problems, and I don't know if any of that is like, you know, things that are really going to affect the price, because like Chris said, there's just so much invested into Ethereum at this point that it's almost becoming too big to fail here with so much, you know, money propping it up, the ecosystem. And but yeah.
Well, yeah, some good points there too. I mean, how do you guys think that most of these ICOs or the bigger ones did convert to dollars, or
I think that they probably converted enough for operating expenses a long time ago. If they haven't, I would attribute that to very poor mismanagement of their actual funding that they raised. You know, I have seen some ICOs that have cashed out, you know, upwards of 20 to 40% of their Ether into dollars way before this even happened. So as long as they've done that, I don't see those ICOs contributing to the panic selling, but maybe these smaller ones that, you know, they did an ICO, they said, oh, I'll just hold this Ether because it's just going to keep going up and up. And now they're kind of coming into this tail end where they're saying, we have bills to pay. We kind of screwed the pooch. Ether's going down. We might as well cash out a sizable chunk right now before it's too late.
Right. And they've already lost 80%.
Exactly. And it's just, it goes back to that just mismanagement of their funds.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the bigger ICOs aren't really at risk for that. The ones that are being managed appropriately and have kind of that long-term value.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have an opinion or no? I haven't really tracked too much of ICOs and how they come out via the big ones or the small ones. But you know, when in any offering that I ever participated in via whether it was an initial public offering or a secondary in the market, part of the exchange or the bank that was bringing the company public or releasing new shares had a fiduciary responsibility to the company releasing those shares to be the buyer of last resort at particular levels, adding levels of support to, you know, on the day of and maybe the week following the release of either initial coins or secondary coins in the marketplace. Does anybody have an opinion on how the management of these coins is actually flowing? Is there a process that guys are using to support the flippers in the market?
I think there is. We just don't know of it because they have no reason, incentive, or a responsibility to disclose it. You know, that's how I think of the marketplace right now, because a lot of these, the trading volume is happening on exchanges that just don't have regulation in place to, you know, for them to, divulge that sort of information and how it's managed.
Yeah, I think it'd be a helpful exercise on any well-known ICO coming to market to study the strengths. When if you see an ICO come out and it has a pop, right, and then you get the flippers who have put immediate sell pressure on it, and evaluate the downward fall and where it stops and pauses to see if there really are proper metrics in place to support not only the investors in these ICOs, but also the company itself, and to see how that's being managed. That's something I want to pay attention to.
I think it's a great idea, Brennan. I kind of skeptical that anybody's really executing on that. I think it's probably something that needs to develop over time, though. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it should happen. It should happen for the safety. I mean, I would imagine that regulators would want to see something like that. If and when the day comes that these markets are regulated, that would be a massive point for the regulators to approve or disapprove. To say, how are you handling the safety of everyone's money, including the company and all the investors involved in the project? That should be something I think that people should ride on.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add, especially since the ICO market has had such a dark cloud hanging over it recently, if somebody could publish something that would be meaningful to the overall public, saying, hey, if you want to invest in ICO, we do have some safety parameters, because in every deal that comes to market, be it primary or secondary, there should be those levels of support. And if they're not, then regulators are going to take a real issue with that, as should every investor.
Yeah, but then again, you did just bring up a few terms that ICOs would never say in their wildest dreams. A responsibility to investors.
Right.
I mean, a lot of these are viewed as donations. So, what sort of responsibility do they really have? They got their money, and that's about it. There are obviously ones that handle and take that responsibility a lot more, even though they don't say it in words or in sort of legal, contract or space. It's all the reputation, and a lot of them do take it very seriously, even though it is still legal gray area. But yeah, that's kind of funny. Yeah,
I mean, that's opportunity right there for anybody who says, hey, let us help bring your company, your ICO, to the market, because here's how we operate.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Yeah. Especially when you're going to see these, these exchanges become broker dealers with, allowing securities being traded on their exchanges. And I think that whole thing's just going to evolve. We're not there yet.
What else would be helpful is if we get this options market to develop already. I haven't been keeping up on like LedgerX's business dealings or what current events, but that's something that needs to happen. I mean, if you were sitting on a huge amount of ether, you did an ICO, what an easier way than say, all right, yeah, we sell half now, kind of like you were saying, Chris, and okay, let's see what the price does. Or we can also just buy some puts at, you do your ICO and price was up at 1,000. Okay, we'll buy some 800 puts out 6 months. That would have really helped you down here at 257.
It's a fantastic point, because that's a way that the professional money managers, hedge downside risk and eliminate, pounding bids, when you have sensitive or fragile markets.
Yeah, and then they don't have to, most of these guys are so busy running their company or trying to do what they want to do on their ICO project. They're not want to be in here trading and, we broke 7,000, let's hit them down, and then we can't really get short. There's no futures. So that's a tough thing. There's just really nothing you can do right now if you want to minimize your risk other than, hitting bids down and selling out. And there's no really other ways to play the other side of the market. I don't think these guys who do an ICO project aren't going to turn around and start trading a bunch on BitMix.
No, I don't think so.
That being said, now is a pretty nice time to be doing an ICO on Ethereum, because that exchange rate's real good for you on your token exchange.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, no kidding. And you know what happens now? Like, you know, you raise that Ethereum, and then you know a few months down the line, and the cycle starts turning up, and Ethereum's all of a sudden worth, you know, back up its all-time highs. I mean that just made projects. They had more money than they knew what to do with.
Oh yeah. If you look at all the big name projects that were running their ICOs last year, back when Ethereum was, you know, under $100, they sold into those highs. That's a 15x return just on their ICO, not even anything on their product end. So
Wow.
there's a huge potential there, as long as they're being managed correctly. But it sounds like there's probably a decent amount of them that are very, very not
Yeah.
taking that approach.
I mean, when the barrier to entry is so low, that's just what you're gonna get. You know.
Yeah.
Well, what else did you want to hit on, Alec? I I kind of just talked about the top of the show. So if we are still in this, you know, long-term consolidation where it's just lower high after lower high after lower high, if we just did put in another pivot lower high yesterday, there's definitely room to kind of just drift back lower in front of this major support that we keep holding. So we still haven't, you know, really left the barn longer term. Maybe that's closer to the end of this month, like we talked about on the 8.6 monthly cycle. It's yet to be seen. But that's the case. I mean, we talked a little bit about today. If you can't hold the 30-day, you could be patient on some of the stuff. You know, maybe Litecoin goes back to 50. I think you take a stab down there. I like the way Monero traded this week. Switch over to that one.
Well, one more thing about Bitcoin, though, and the most important thing you haven't brought up yet: the MACD histogram is bullish for the first time in 8 months. So that means I went long yesterday on it. And everything all in on that indicator, because I guess that's what everyone watches.
That's definitely a popular one.
Jeez.
I've always found a little bit of lag with it, but
it dropped 500 the morning after.
It wasn't even 24 hours after crossing.
After the CoinDesk posted an article about, you know, the first time in 8 months, this passes zero. All right, time to get in.
Well, that is kind of the tough thing. I mean, I remember when I first got into trading, it was like, maybe Brennan, you did the same thing. Those moving average crosses, you think there's something there. It just kind of turns out to be too lagging. But I mean, I think we be patient here on BTC. I mean, some of these alts that turned up, like you can see Monero here. I mean, you still haven't broken the 8, so some of this stuff might actually trade pretty well. I want to kind of get involved in Monero on the next pullback. I think it's probably on the top, one of our top ideas. You can see the volumes really picked up. Ether, I think you got to wait on. That was a pretty big technical break we just talked about. So there's a lot of patience here. Now that we did get that failure in BTC right in front of that trend line. Was there any other coins you guys have in YouTube land, or?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, what's the boss better goes?
Neo versus BTC kind of ramped up this week too, but we couldn't get above the bands. They tried, but everything, all these alts most of them are still just making long-term lower highs. We can't even get above the bands. Neo, we can't get above. Go.
Yeah, they all kind of just in unison here. Is like trading is like one equity on the whole marketplace.
We just need Bitcoin to finally make higher highs, and I think that's going to switch the momentum big time.
You know, Jason, one of the things that I noticed when you're pulling up your Monero chart, if you look at the volume charts at the bottom, if you could go back to that real quick, I'll kind of show what stood out to me on this and what should stand out to people, if, you know, as they're beginning their trading. But if you zoom in on
right here
on it, yeah. So, you know, the volume charts are great, right? I love to see all the purple high volume days where the coin is actually going up, right? But the second to last bar, where you have an uptick in the price, it's a high volume day, as high as the the one 2 bars ago. But look at the minimal move there, right? That's running right into resistance, into a ceiling. And when it fails to punch, when all that volume fails to punch through there, the next bandwidth down is sell pressure, right? You ran right into a ceiling right there. And I think people, when evaluating charts, also need to pay very close attention to the volume that's associated with those moves.
Yeah, you've been consistently saying that. Absolutely right.
It's the only thing that when you don't have companies announcing, quarterly reports, then you just have to be able to read the charts right, and looking at the technicals on them is great, but paying attention to volume and what happened to the stock price or the coin price on those moves is really telling. And for me, that looks like that all that buy side volume and its slight uptick in price shows a real resistance to me, and that would give me reason for pause.
Yeah, definitely. And then also, on the big down days, right? If there's a lot of distribution, I kind of noticed right here. Let's see what the date is on this sucker. That was back at the beginning of August. No, that's sorry, March 8th. Dyslexic. March 8th. So look at this huge, what we call real money candle here. This actually had more volume than on the way up. That's a lot of distribution there. That kind of set in motion this whole down move. I mean, they were blasting that at 300, finally bottomed out at 160. Yeah, no, but I look at, and then there's just a lot of quiet volume here as we were basing. The entire market was pretty low volume, but that's pretty good accumulation. So that's one I think you keep on your radar. This puts in a pretty good buy wall, as we kind of like to say. So halfway, 50% retrace of that move off the lows is kind of around 100. So maybe we get involved around the buck there. Oh, some of you guys said Zcash. We just glanced at it real quickly. Still just a lot of lower highs on Zcash. Man, a lot of volume here when you finally got above the bands, and then just couldn't really gain any traction above the 200, and then just falls into this same pattern all the alts have, right? Just lower highs, put in another pivot lower high. Big contrast to what we just looked at too. I mean, there's no volume on that rally. That looks a lot different than the Monero chart. I would probably want to wait and see some more strength. Let the market kind of prove to you that, there are some real buyers there on this one.
Yeah. Well, I think we got a call. We got to hop on here in a little bit.
Like you do. Okay.
But I mean, just before everyone heads out, just give us a follow. I think we're going to go live. We're going to try to go live every day at about 11. So the same time, 11 Eastern. So, if you guys want some constant, updates, we'll be here.
That sounds good. We are doing that daily. Okay. I like that. Sounds good, brother. All right, Chris, thanks for jumping on, man.
Good thing.
Brennan, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys, take care.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.